All right, hello and welcome into another episode of Podcast on D-Shot. We're going to talk some Warhawk football retrospective as I'm going to bring in former Daily Jefferson County Union sports editor and now the sports editor for, as his voicemail says, all kinds of newspapers. And I'm going to add in this one, member of the Hall of Fame of the Wisconsin Football Coaches Association as a media member, Jeff Seisser. Jeff, thanks for joining me.
No problem. Good to see you, D-Shot.
All right, so as we're going to kind of talk about the last 15 years, I'm going to probably be better at talking about the last 10. My first question to you with kind of how Whitewater kind of got started on the national championship type of spotlight. 2002, 2003, Whitewater scheduled Mount Union in the non-conference schedule. How much do you think scheduling Mount Union in that non-conference schedule those years kind of helped get Whitewater in the national spotlight?
Well, that was huge. That was very huge. They played them home and home. I had the luxury of covering the home game at Whitewater. They also scheduled St. John's, I believe, one of those years. And St. John's at the time was a top 2, top 3 team as well. And I go back to what Bob Grisovich, former coach, said. He said that really started everything, and they played well against Mount Union, especially out in Alliance, and they knew that they could possibly play at that level. And lo and behold, a couple years later, they meet in the first of what was many national championship games.
I guess kind of talk about kind of Grisovich as a coach and that transition to Leipold. When it transitioned to Leipold in 2007, what kind of things that Grisovich did as a coach, did any of that stay, or did Lance kind of reinvent his own wheel, or what was that? Obviously I didn't get to Whitewater until 2010. What kind of things did Grisovich do as a coach in terms of, I guess?
Well, I guess you could say that Brez planted the seed. Whitewater was in the national championship game the year before, obviously 2 years before Lance got there, and so Brez got him to that level. Lance just was able to carry it on, beyond that, obviously, in many ways. But even years before the national championship, Whitewater was just knocking on that door. They just kept losing out that last game. It seemed to lacrosse every year. 1 or 2 losses, and Whitewater just wasn't in the playoffs. But then when Lance got hired, I think Lance carried on that tradition of pound the rock and run the ball first. But then they also went to the air a little bit more, and the quarterback became part of that offense. It was a deadly combination. So I think it was part of what Brez planted the seed, but then Lance carried it on and made that seed into a huge redwood tree after that.
Obviously, it was a good move to hire Lance, but like looking back at it, what stuck out in terms of Lance? Because obviously there were a lot of Whitewater favorites, I guess, when Grisovich retired. Obviously Stan Sweefel was in that conversation as well.
Yeah, I would say it was very close between Stan and Lance. I mean, I actually thought it was going to be Stan at the time. I had a great relationship working side by side with Stan for 15, 16 years. But then going back and knowing Lance's pedigree, I mean, I'm obviously from the same hometown as Lance. We grew up knowing one another, and I follow Lance. He's a Barry Alvarez disciple. He coached under Barry, in the 92 and 93 season, the 93 season being the Rose Bowl, the first Rose Bowl year. He moved on and coached at Nebraska Omaha, and then eventually at Nebraska under Frank Solich before he was hired at Whitewater. So he had a Division I pedigree, but I know he said many years ago that he wanted to be a head coach, and it didn't matter what level. So he was okay with coming back to the Division III level to be a head coach. And once he got there, he took it, obviously took the bull by the horns and turned into, arguably one of the best Division III coaches in history.
All right, so 2010 was my first year. I had to reference this because I was in the marching band my first year at Whitewater, and I'm sorry to Glenn Hayes because I completely winged the fight song. I only did the melody on the trombone. But obviously, some of my favorite moments from the last couple of years from Lance's tenure, obviously those. If you're talking about your top 4 to 5 games over the last 10, I think you got to go that 13 Stake Bowl, the 14 Stake Bowl being Lance's last game. Lance's last game at the Perk sticks out to me. And I'm going to say the Wartburg game because the comeback was significant. Do you kind of.
Yeah, and obviously the last, I wasn't there the last couple years. I had moved on. I had pushed some of the responsibility even before that to Josh Smith, so I wasn't at a lot of the games that really jump out to me. Maybe more of my tenure was before 2010, but the game that does stick out is Lance's last game. It was also It was also just after Perk had passed away. And so there was the legacy of Coach Perkins, who Lance played for, and then Coach Grisovich, who Lance played for, and then eventually replaced as the head coach. So there was a lot of history in that game, and a lot of obviously a lot of emotion in that game, knowing that Lance would never be back at Whitewater anymore.
Absolutely, it was pretty huge when obviously Linfield in that game. If we're going to that game. There was I think some sort of pass that Sam Riddle threw that got tipped off the run, or got tipped. The running back could have caught it off the deflection. And if the running back could have caught that maybe we're talking something different. But obviously the big play at the end of that game was John Flood with the strip sack.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that one. I'm glad you said his name. I was trying to think of his name when you were talking. But John Flood, I think he had 2 or 3 sacks, prior to that, and that might have been his 3rd or 4th sack, and then that was and they got the ball back, and it was a really tight game. There was also some emotion in that game for Linfield, if I remember. They had a player earlier during that season that had been stabbed to death. So they had a lot of emotion. Linfield for me was kind of the start of what this whole thing began at Whitewater. That year that Whitewater went out to McMinnville, Oregon. I was honored to be on the trip with them. They beat Linfield, which was the defending national champ. And I'll say it, the best game that I have ever covered at any level. It was just back and forth. Whitewater won the game 44-41, and on Justin Bieber's late touchdown run. And so when they played the next time they played Linfield, I believe that was the next time they played Linfield. There was some emotion or some recollection of what that program was and what Whitewater's program was at the time.
I think there were a couple other Linfield playoff games. A couple at the Perk. There's a 17-point deficit in 13, I think, and then there's the 2009 game that Lane Kimball kind of has the highlights of. That I think Lavelle had a couple big touchdowns right at the end.
Yeah, Lavelle had a couple big touchdowns, didn't he, through the year?
Yeah.
They're all kind of added up. I mean, he had over 100, so it was, and again, a lot of the games kind of blend together for me. But way back to when you said they played Mount Union, nobody thought that Whitewater could play at Mount Union's level. After that game in 2005, when they played in the Stag Bowl, Whitewater lost by just 7, and had a touchdown reversed right before the half. And then right after the half, I remember Nate Kamick ripped off a 95-yard touchdown run. So it was basically a 14-point swing in a matter of maybe 5 minutes, if you want to call it that. So Whitewater was right there. And the next year was kind of the Pierre Garcon game, but then after that, Whitewater kind of took charge.
I guess we can kind of transition to the Kevin Bullis era a little bit. What do you think was kind of obviously Kevin had to come in and kind of get his own staff together, and that sort of thing. Rob Erickson was really good as the defensive coordinator the last couple of years. I think they've pretty much solved the offensive coordinator situation after kind of having somebody who kind of tried to get his payback somehow, I guess, that's the best way to put it. But Pete Jennings has done well the last couple of years. Just kind of talk about how that transition from Leipold to Bolus.
Well, I mean, first, yeah, Lance, I guess, took the majority of the staff with him to Buffalo, so that left, Kevin kind of on his own. He had a couple of, I guess, former players like a Jace Rindall and Brent Allen that stayed back and were able to help solidify the staff or start the staff. But I went through all that interviewing process, and Kevin, I think it was Kevin's job to lose, but he really nailed it in the interview process. And then, he has obviously kept the program, where it should be at, getting back to the national championship game, I guess a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And I believe they had the team that was going to get back to it again, before COVID hit and canceled the WEAC season and the NCAA season. Kevin's really done a great job. I mean, he and I have been friends, probably since he's been here. And I think he's going to continue to build the program and keep it at the level where we all expect Whitewater football to be.
Do you ever feel like, I kind of feel like he's the most quotable Whitewater coach in terms of a lot of different sports? Because he seems like he says, I said this to Lance in my interview with Lance, and Lance kind of chuckled about it, is that Kevin kind of says the same thing. It's like, holy buckets, I got to be, he said the word candid 6 times in his intro press conference.
Well, I guess Lance puts up, knowing Lance very well, he puts up a wall, but he's very meticulous in how he answers questions. I guess, don't want to put him in this category, but you've seen Aaron Rodgers being interviewed. He thinks about his answers before he gives them. And Lance is not going to, he's going to really think about his answers. Not that Kevin doesn't, but just Kevin is just kind of a little bit more free-spirited in that sense. He'll give you some really good quotes. There isn't a bad quote out of there. I give Pat Miller he's had some great quotes through the years. John Bodenlich has had some great quotes through the years. Kerry Corallo. I mean, when it gets right down to it, they're all Whitewater. They all bleed purple like most of us do. I still bleed a little purple. Obviously, I got my purple on today. And, I think at the end of the day, it's the Warhawk family and, powered by tradition.
I guess I kind of said what my favorite game over the last 15 years was. What other games kind of stick out to you?
Well, I mentioned, I go way back. I go back to 1990, believe it or not. It's the first year I covered Whitewater football. The Linfield game in Linfield or in, McMinnville, Oregon, obviously was the best game I've ever seen. The game, I guess a couple years after that, the Danny Jones game in the snow that got Whitewater to the 2007 title game, and then they won it. And then
is that the game that Lance referenced that was Wabash?
Wabash was
the snowstorm.
The snowstorm. I think that was the quarter or semifinal game.
Okay.
The game to get to the national championship, they beat, I believe it was Mary Hardin Baylor.
Okay.
Real low scoring game. But the Wabash game, if you want to bring that one up, we did a radio show with WFAW that morning at the Perk, and it was sunshine outside. It was beautiful out. We went to breakfast. By the time we got back to the stadium, there was an inch of snow on the ground, and by kickoff, there was 3 inches of snow on the ground, and by halftime, there was almost a foot of snow on the ground. It snowed hard, and what jumps out at me is that Wabash was head to toe wearing white, from their helmets to their shoes. So it was hard to even see them in the snow, even being right in front of them.
I guess from a coverage standpoint, what's your favorite Stig Bowl memory?
Well, the first one, or the first win, I should say. Actually, the first game in 2005 was, I just looked around because I looked forward to that every year watching that game. Before Whitewater, I attended lacrosse, and lacrosse seemed to always be playing in some sort of big game, and they had been in that game a few times. So it was great to see a Wisconsin team play there. And then all of a sudden I'm standing there in, Salem, Oregon, looking around, Salem, Virginia, looking around, and couldn't believe that I was covering a game with Whitewater, and, they played well. But then the 2007 game was obviously very memorable, winning it. The 2009 game, nothing takes you away from that 2009 game. I mentioned snowstorms. That was the snowstorm of all snowstorms. That they call the Snow Bowl to this day, when they had to postpone the game, 3-4 hours, and It was ridiculous how much snow they had out there in Virginia, and it was even more ridiculous to see how they handled it, which they didn't. They didn't know how to handle the snow. But there's been a lot of them. I mean, I can still remember the first game I ever covered at Whitewater, and it was a very memorable game. It was against UW-Lacrosse, and Whitewater hadn't beaten Lacrosse in probably 5-6 years, and they beat them that day. And I just, you know, I miss covering Whitewater football, and I hope to get back to some games this year.
I was going to say about that 2009 State Bowl. I remember I heard a story that the marching band maybe missed that game.
They got about halfway
and had to play in a Buffalo Wild Wings, I think is what the story I've heard.
Yeah, I think they got to somewhere in like Ohio, if I'm not mistaken, and then that's all the further they could go. But you had to be there to see how much snow that was actually there, and it's we grew up in Wisconsin. We see snow. I mean, we may even get snow yet this March. Who knows? But the snow they got out there, it was heavy. It was wet. Nobody knew how to handle it. People were on the roads, couldn't even drive more than 10 miles an hour and getting stuck. And just the fact that they were able to play that game that day, they were talking about moving it to the next day or even the day after. But and Whitewater won it, which was even better, which was the greatest feeling ever.
I would kind of say the 2010 State Bowl, because I was actually at it, has some sort of Lavelle Coppage 60-yard run right at the end of it. I think it was like 24-21 at that point, and I think he burst it off. I think I'm correct.
That's the first one I missed because I was at the first 5, and then I missed. I sent Josh Smith was covering the team then, and that was a game that I didn't even want to watch because I felt strange not being there. In fact, I was actually covering a basketball tournament at the time, so I didn't get a chance to watch it. But it was games after that I've watched Whitewater play. It's tough not being there. I was hoping that they were going to get back. 2 years ago when they got back to the one in Texas, my sister lives maybe a half an hour away. I just couldn't get down there. And now I believe next year, if they play, they're going to be out in near Canton, Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd love to go to that as well if that happens. But yeah, going back to that 2010 game, it was it's Lavelle Coppage, and years before that it was Justin Beaver, and man, what a great run of running backs Whitewater has had through the years.
I guess as we kind of talk about other stories, what's your other interesting story around Warhawk football that doesn't pertain like Bresowitz to Leipold or Leipold to Bolus or even the Beaver to Coppage storyline?
I don't know if people know this, but after Brez got done coaching, he and I ended up being roommates for several years out in Virginia, and we already had a close relationship, but it even got closer then, and that's just something that people might not know. I think the world of Coach Bresowitz. I think the world of Lance. I think the world of Coach Bull. I think the world of anybody that ever coached at Whitewater. But when it comes right down to it, Coach Bresowitz was the one that put his hand on my shoulder about way back in '94 when I got the sports editor's job, and said, always remember you're part of the Warhawk family, and I'll never forget that.
The one storyline that's been popping out for me that doesn't have to do with Leipold or doesn't have to do with Brez or Bolus or the Beaver Coppage thing is that in these last 15 years, we've had one dude play running back for the Badgers, then go play 1 year get in legal trouble, go play for Whitewater for like 1 year. And on the flip side of that, we had a guy go play 1 year for Whitewater and then transfer to Wisconsin.
Who are all them?
Booker Stanley and Ricky Finko.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about Ricky. I mean, if Ricky would have stayed around, wow, how good. I mean, he was a tremendous wide receiver. I guess I forgot about Ricky a little bit, but yeah, Booker Stanley was that was an interesting one as well. And there's been others through the years that transfers that have gone on to do some special things. I go back all the way back to Joe Panos, who played for Whitewater in my first year, or first or second year covering Whitewater, and then he transferred to the Badgers and was a key part of that Rose Bowl team. And There were some others, and even in the league, like a Ryan Ramczyk who started his games in the days at Stevens Point and is now, moved on to the Badgers and then is a star with the Saints. And, I think maybe off track a little bit, but I think D3 football it's great football. And if you can play at a high level at D3 football, like a Mount Union, a Whitewater, an Oshkosh, you can play at the next level.
All right, so here's where we're gonna go with the next thing, because last night I kind of pulled together, I guess, a little bit of a all-time roster that I kind of put together of different positions, and I thought I'd kind of bounce off what you think. Do you have time for that?
Yeah, I do. I'm going to be testing my memory a little bit, but
All right, so I'm going to start with my quarterbacks, and I got three, because usually a NFL roster goes three deep. And then I got an honorable mention there. So I'm going Blanchard, Barrett, and Donovan. And then my honorable mention, it would be Cole Wilbur.
All right, I'm going to throw one in. I mean, those are great. I mean, Blanchard's got to be at the top. But I'm going to throw in. I'm also going to throw in Justin Jacobs.
That was the other one I was going to throw in there.
Yeah, he had, it was great. His last 2 years were I think epic. He got Whitewater to the Stag Bowl in 05 and 06. So, and Justin was a great quarterback as well.
Okay, so my running backs, obvious first two, Lavelle Coppage, Justin Beaver. And then my 3 and my 4, I'm going Jordan Ratliff, aka J-Rat. And then I threw in Antoine Anderson because he had a couple of 1,000-yard rushing seasons along with Coppage. And then my honorable mentions there are Demo and Dennis Moore and Alex Pete.
Can I go way back?
Sure.
I'm going to go back to, I still think to this day, and no disrespect to anybody on that list, including Justin Beaver or Lavelle Coppage, I think Travis Talton was the greatest running back, maybe the greatest player Whitewater has ever had. He blew his knee out, and I referenced that first game I ever covered at Whitewater was against La Crosse, and he blew his knee out in that game, like right in front of me, literally right in front of me. He went on to play for the Bears. I mean, he got in camp with the Bears, but I think he was the most talented running back or football player that Whitewater has ever had.
I didn't really know where to go with fullback, so I felt like I had to go with the obvious one, and I had to go with Bernie Tamzit.
There's one I'm thinking of right now that was a pretty good fullback as well. It'll come to me. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank right now, but
even though you could
back in the day, Whitewater had they called them Thunder and Lightning, and it was Eddie McKinney and John D'Amato, and John D'Amato was built like a fullback, but he ran like a running back, so maybe John D'Amato.
Okay, isn't he a legendary, kind of a really significant high school coach now?
Yeah, he's over at I think he's at Hamilton, Sussex Hamilton, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. We could even throw any of these guys in there, because I know Whitewater tends to use tight ends as a fullback as well. But tight ends, I put Derek Junikin as my 1, Tony Gamina as my 2, and Brent Campbell as my 3.
Pete Schmidt has to be on that list as well.
Yeah.
He was, and he got a trial with the Redskins and was on the 05 team, and unfortunately got that infamous overturned touchdown call right before halftime in the 05 game. But yeah, Pete's a good one too.
I was gonna put him on there. I probably should have. I was thinking more recent.
Yeah. Again, I'm going back to like, the 05s through 10. I'm sorry, but that's my great memories there.
I feel like you're gonna feel like you're gonna disagree with my top 6 here in terms of wide receivers, because there's one in the honorable mentions that probably should be higher. So wide receivers, I got Kumaro, Derek Stanley. I'm putting Aaron Roosh as the number 3. Adam Brandis is the number 4. Tyler Huber is my 5, and I'm going to go Delvin Darians, a.k.a. Woody, a.k.a. Mamba Trill, Marcus Hudson. And then honorable mentions, I got Justin Howard, JT Parrish, and I feel like the one you're going to make me put up higher is Neil Mervica.
Neil Mervica had one of the best reception. Well, actually had, first of all, that list is spot on, D-Shot. That I wouldn't change anything on that list. But Neil Mervica had two of the greatest plays in Whitewater history. The one in the 06 season when he returned the opening kickoff against Mary Hardin Baylor, and Whitewater won the game 7-3. That was a tremendous. That one first obviously jumps off the map. And then the other one was the catch he made, I believe, in the 07. I think it's the 07 season, where they were losing to Whitewater, or excuse me, they were losing to Stevens Lacrosse in the first round of the playoffs, and they were done. And he made a catch over the middle. I got a great picture of it, actually, I think. And I took it in for like a 60 or 70-yard touchdown, and they won the game, and then went on to win everything and won their first national title.
Okay, now to the offensive line. I got my number one right now, and he's probably going to go in the third round of the NFL draft this year, hopefully to the Packers, is Quinn Miners. And then I got Nate Truin. I have to throw in Brent Allen there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to go my boy from Kenosha, and that's going to harken back to my worst UW-TV broadcast ever, is saying my boy from Kenosha. Logan Allemond, I got as my number 4. I got Kepi, Tony Kepnick. I got Spencer Shire, Johnny Wiederholt, Connor Peters, Eli Slonaker, and then I threw in one of the guys from Logan's days is Robbie Ustruck.
Yeah. Oh man, those are some good ones. Good name there, Robbie Ustruck too. Okay, and the guy that I would put on there from back in the day too as well is Brady Ramzier. Lives in my hometown, Jefferson, but played high school at Luther Prep, Watertown Luther Prep. Brady, he got a tryout with the Canadian Football League, and there are some others that, man, I mean, there are so many. There's a guy that we haven't mentioned about his coaches, and Steve Dinkle. Steve was, became the offensive coordinator, but he recruited a lot of linemen. And as we know, running backs can't go anywhere without a great line. And I think Whitewater, in all those years, and even up to this, up to a couple of years ago, that offensive line has been one of the best offensive lines in football. I believe it outweighed Wisconsin once or twice. So great list of guys there, though. It's hard to pick. It's hard to pick 6, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so defensive linemen, defensive ends. My number 1 is Lou Manette. I got Ryan Kleppe. Some of this is going through the Whitewater record book and seeing who had the most sacks or interceptions and that sort of stuff. Harry Henschler was a Gagliardi Award finalist. I got him on here. I got Michael Bratchett. I got Casey Casper. I got Jake Holstein is another guy I thought was pretty good during my freshman year at Whitewater. Then I got my honorable mentions as John Baldwin, Mike Dufresne, the new coach at Finlandia, Luke Hibner, who has that one crazy interception in the 2010 quarters. Brandon Tamzett, so we got another Tamzett here, John Flood, David O'Gorman, Zach Franz, and then the guy who has the hardest name ever to pronounce in the WIAC, Mackenzie Belegnanahi.
Ooh, I'm going to go another one too. Ryan Grisovich, former Burlington standout. He had a great career with Whitewater as well back in the mid 2000s. You mentioned, if you wouldn't have said Ryan Kleppe, I would have shut the machine off here. So Ryan, if you put 1 or 2 inches on Kleppe, I think he'd have been a Division I football player. He was dominant at that nose guard position, and had one of the best football games ever. I've seen a football player play against Mary Hardin Baylor down there that year when Coach Fredrickson from Mary Hardin Baylor, after the game, basically his statement was, "That boy kicked our butt," and he was an amazing football player, good football coach as well through the years when he was at Mount Horeb.
Is it Fredenberg or Fredrickson?
Pete, did I say Pete? What did I say? Pete. It's Pete Fredenberg, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Right. Yeah. He was. Yeah. Well, when he was there, I don't think he's there anymore. I think he. Or is he still there? He had some.
I think he is still there.
Okay, but yeah, he was a Southerner, and he was really impressed with Ryan that day, and as we all were.
All right, now to the linebackers. Jace Rendall, Cole Klotz, a Gagliardi Award finalist. I got Kyle Wismer, AJ Rabel, Lane Olson, Justin Dishler, Bryce Lashinsky, Kyle Subanowski, and then the honorable mentions, I got Ryan Cortez, Paul Foster, Greg Arnold, Jacob Herbs, Bo Martin, Matt Seitz, Kyle Schiedemeyer, and Matt Anderson.
And Rob Whiteduck, you got to get on there as well. I remember doing a column one time. Like many years ago, Penn State was known as linebacker U, and I there was that run of most of those guys on that list. Some of them were, there was like 5 or 6 on one team, and I called them linebacker U at the Division III level. And Whitewater certainly had a bevy of outstanding linebackers.
I forgot to add this when we were talking about Bolus, though. Before I graduated from Whitewater, I wrote a column on who was going to replace Lance, and I didn't even throw Bolus in there. I was just like thinking a bunch of Whitewater guys, and I randomly threw out that offensive assistant that Whitewater kind of had this year in Jags.
Oh, that's right. He was on the staff this year, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Or he's going to be on the staff, right? Or
I have no idea, because it still lists. You can go in the directory at Whitewater, and it still lists Jags as kind of as like a staff member.
Yeah,
but then it's like he was at Kentucky during this Division I season somehow, so I have no idea what's going on there, and I'm sure Bolus could probably say what's going on there. But
I'm dating myself, but I remember seeing Jags play at Whitewater. So
okay, so for the secondary, I felt the top 2 that I have on here were kind of locks. Brady Gravold, Marcus McLean. I got Ryan Winsky. I got Noah Tim. Elite 88 award winner, or whatever that award was then. Jared Kiso. Another Tremper grad, Matt Blazewski, if I can get that name right.
Yeah, Blaze was a good one.
Matt McCulloch and Ryan Wakeman, and then my honorable mentions are Ben Farley, Troney Schumpert, Vince Mason, and Famous Hasty.
Famous Hasty, that's one of the best names in college football of any level. Nick Romeo was a really good one as well. Again, I like your list a lot. And then a former Fort Atkinson player, Nick Brown. Is it Nick Brown? I think it was Nick Brown that was on one of those early teams, and they've had some great D-backs as well.
As long as we're talking about Fort, we might as well throw in the storyline that Jaron Borland played for the Warhawks for a little bit under his dad.
Oh yeah, that was I grew up watching Brian play and his older brother Kyle play in high school, and then obviously I covered several games that Jaron played, when he played at Fort Atkinson, and very special to have Jaron play. It was a 3-generation there, because their dad, Jaron's grandpa and Brian's dad, Glenn, was a coach on the Whitewater staff before he became an announcer.
All right, so I'm going to go to the special teams. I felt kicker was pretty obvious since this dude has a NCAA record. I had to go Jeff Shebler as the kicker, and I felt like the punter, it's any combination of these 3, and I don't know where to go with it. Eric Kindler, Lake Bacher, and Chris Roschel, who's kind of the more natural punter. I don't know where you would go with that.
Yeah. Kindler, I think they called him Smoothie, right? Smoothie Kindler. There wasn't many more that I can really, in Whitewater history, he wasn't the best punter at Whitewater, but obviously he had a great career. I think Matt Turk way back in the day.
Yeah. I was kind of going back with Stag Bowls and whatnot.
Right. But Matt Turk, I remember him as a tight end, not much of a punter, but, for a guy that, the most significant NFL career ever for a Whitewater player, Matt Turk. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Brez was the punter too way back in the day. So I don't know if he was good at all.
I'd say punt and kick returner would be Derek Stanley. I don't think there would be that much debate.
No, if I'm not mistaken, go back just a couple years. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. Good punt returner, kick returner for Whitewater. I think he also plays D-back.
I was also I'm gonna add a name to the secondary list because I knew I was gonna forget this, but I gotta put like Bailey Brunick on there because he had quite a few blocked punts. You got to add him onto the special teams
Okay.
side of things because.
Okay. I'm still trying to go back and think of another punter, but that list was, Kindler's got to be on there, and I'm trying to think of their punter was back in like the early days of the 05. Like, again, my memory is starting to go. I got to get to more Warhawk games, refresh my memory.
I gotta get to a couple as well. I gotta get. I'm hoping I just can get a new job so I can get the next thing. Let's just anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, as I think you and I both agree that Whitewater football, I think we've both been spoiled as to how good, the years that we covered Whitewater. You and I shared a lot of press boxes together, and I don't know if they're ever going to be at that, extreme level where they were winning, that many in a row, and but let's hope they are. Let's hope Whitewater keeps building, winning that recruiting battle. Obviously, Oshkosh and Platteville have gotten kind of into that recruiting war with Whitewater, which is great for the WIAC, great for Midwest football. And we'll see how all this pandemic affects programs. I know that some D3 schools played some games. I think the entire Texas conference played a 4-game schedule, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm looking forward to getting to some games this next fall.
I'm not gonna add my bad thing in terms of press boxes. I don't want to talk about. So I'm probably the only person that's actually been banned from the Perkins Stadium press box for 1 year.
Oh, that's when you go on the field. Then they'll never know you're down there.
Yeah. I was gonna say, what are your thoughts about Quinn Miners?
Never met him, never saw him play. Maybe I saw him play a couple years ago. I went to one game, the lacrosse game at Whitewater. So I maybe saw him play, but it doesn't ring a bell. But obviously he's turned a lot of heads. Didn't get since they canceled the combine, at least he got his pro day yesterday or the day before, and again turned some heads. And he's going to be on an NFL. He's going to be playing next year, hopefully next fall and winter, playing on a roster somewhere.
All right, I'm gonna add one more thing in there. Is I'm looking forward to, since we finally got him on the schedule, and I've been waiting for 10 years. My brother went to Carthage and has a music degree from there. We finally got a Whitewater Carthage matchup the next 2 years, so I'm looking forward to that.
I always like Wisconsin teams playing like crossover division or crossover conferences. Back in the day, we always played Carroll. We always played Lakeland, teams like that. And there were some competitive games. Obviously, Whitewater has kind of taken over, and the WEAC. But I think the WEAC should cross over with, the Illinois conference and the Midwest conference, and keep it local, and keep so that way you can see the local talent.
I'm looking forward to that because I also have some connections with the Carthage music department. I know the director of bands there, and I know one of the vocal people there. That's kind of, maybe I'll have some bragging rights a little bit. So, all right. So I guess we'll leave it at that. Thanks Jeff for joining me, and thanks everybody for watching and listening to Podcast on D-Shot.
Thanks for taking me down memory lane.
All right.